I'm going to tell you about how I saw the remains of an archaeological camp from the 50s in the Guatemalan jungle. So, I love my artifacts, archaeology, history, everything. Like this, the Yucatan Peninsula is a place I've talked about in my other videos, and I find that history so fascinating. I love it. And I'll probably make some videos more about just kind of Mayan mythology and the Mayan civilization as a whole, and some of the maybe connections it has to stuff we're going through nowadays with the way that we run our society. But anyway, that being said, I actually just want to focus on a story that I had, because I promised the person who told me this story, Don Julio Ortiz, that I would make sure it is known. So this actually happened inside the Tikal National Park. Tikal is one of the most amazing, incredible sites. It's super famous, and in fact, one of my favorite facts about Tikal is that when George Lucas was vacationing there, he was so inspired by the place that he decided to shoot part of Star Wars there. And actually, I'll probably make a video about the different Star Wars locations I visited, because I think Star Wars is just great and was a monumental movie for a lot of reasons. But anyway, so we went to Tikal. This is me and my friend Christopher. I've traveled with various different friends over the years, and they've all just been spectacular adventure companions. But we had gone to actually inside the archaeological park of Tikal. There's a hotel in there. And this hotel was one of the only ones that we found was actually in the park. We decided we wanted that experience, to be in the jungle, to sleep in these beds with the mosquito nets, and to hear the howler monkeys every night, and just like be sometimes a little too close to nature, because I saw a freaky spider. But anyway, it was a fantastic experience, and Tikal is just an amazing site. And there are thousands of these sites that are still actually just like unexcavated and everything. So to just give you a little bit of the history of the exploration, a lot of times lost cities aren't fully ever lost. Certainly not to the people who live near them. This is true for Machu Picchu and a lot of these other places that we call lost cities that were discovered by Europeans. The local people always know about them. But I think it's interesting just to know that, like, Cortez, for example, Hernan Cortez, passed probably within a couple miles of Tikal in 1525, doesn't mention it at all. A Spanish friar, Andres de Avendaño, was lost in these forests and probably saw ruins that were probably Tikal in 1696, but it took until the mid-1800s for a lot of expeditions to go out to start clearing through it and documenting it and doing the archaeology. An archaeological expedition, though, on the scale of truly understanding the impact of Tikal, this wasn't until the 1950s with the Tikal project that was led by somebody named Edwin M. Shook. So it was really in the 1950s that the archaeology really started there. And we always get these stories of the European or American archaeologists that come in and the work that they did, and they're the people who discovered it, they're the people that did that, and the Smithsonian Institution and everything. And these are huge, important historical things. But today I want to tell you a story of a couple of individuals that maybe didn't make it into many of the history books, that aren't remembered much, and we were told this story by the son of this man. So there we were at this hotel in the National Park of Tikal. And the man who owned this hotel was Don Julio Ortiz. This was an older gentleman, and this was his hotel. That was quite a beautiful, wonderful hotel out there in the jungle where you could really get the experience. And we were staying in these rooms, and we had heard online that there were the remains of vehicles used by the archaeologists in the 50s that were just still out in the forest, that they had just left there, that were, rusted. And so we wanted to see these. We were told by a source that if we asked the people at the hotel, somebody could help us find them. And so we went out, we found, we went to the front desk and we asked them about it, and they told us that we had to talk to Don Julio. Don is a formal title like Sir, or Lord that they have in Spanish, if you've never heard of that. And it's a title of respect, and the title that the knights used back in the day. But anyway, we met with this gentleman, and we asked him how to find these things, if he knew where they were. And he's like, of course I know where they are. He's like, but you'll get lost if you try to go in the jungle after them. And we were pretty confident at that time about our jungle skills, but we also knew that there were jaguars all over the place and different kinds of bugs and insects. And I just remember he told us, you're going to get lost, you're going to get lost. But you know what? I'll take you. And we're like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, it's not that far away. It's a little bit of a trek, but I'll take you in the jungle. You want to go right now? We're like, yeah. So he's taking us out into the jungle, and he's just telling us about all of the history of these things and everything that's happening. And I wrote down the whole entire story. I asked him if I could, and I'll read that to you in a second. But it was just amazing going through the jungle, and he's like, oh, that's where the jaguar comes down to drink, and you know, I saw one the other day and this and that. We're just freaking out. And then he takes us out to this, just, we definitely would have got lost. Absolutely 100% on our own we would have got lost, but we followed this man through this winding path through the densest jungle you would ever see. I mean, the Yucatan Peninsula has just dense jungle. Tropical rainforest, dense jungle. And then we get to this place, and there are just these old mid-century trucks and jeeps and tractors and the blade for a sawmill, and it was just this incredible experience to have him standing there like, yeah, this is, you know, this has been there for years and years and years, decades and decades and decades. And he's like, and my father was the one who drove the archaeologists originally. And we're like, oh my gosh, there's a story here. We have to hear this. And so I asked him, and he told us all this story of his father and his uncle. And I'm going to read it for you now. Don Julio Ortiz took us through the jungle and past jaguar watering places to see the rusted remains of many mid-century cars and trucks. A jeep was included, as well as a tractor and a sawmill, upon which I offered Christopher, my friend, as a sacrifice. Don Julio offered to chop my head off instead, since I was a white man, and Christopher insisted. As we returned, he told us the story of his father, Jose Antonio Ortiz Contreras, and his uncle, Jose Francisco Ortiz Contreras. I will relate it here. The two brothers, were orphaned very young, at 3 and 5 years old. They were signed up to do men's work at 12 and 13, cutting gum trees in the interior of Belize, where they were paid poorly, and Guatemala, where they were paid better. They did this by utilizing some interesting foot tools to climb the trees, which he showed us examples of. They had like spikes in them that you could spike your way up the tree. Wrigley, the company, was purchasing the gum at the time. This was when Wrigley was using natural sources to create their gum instead of the synthetic sources that we have nowadays. And Jose Francisco, ever the entrepreneur, visionario is what Don Julio called him, saved up to buy mules in order to transport gum from the mountains, which before then were inaccessible. So apparently people had been going to the gum trees in some of the lowland areas that were easy to get to, but he's like, there's some good gum trees up there. If we buy mules, we'll be able to just get the best of the gum. So he was the kind of person that had that brain that could see a situation and know what you could do with that situation, which I find those types of people fascinating. The boys also endeavored to learn English while in Belize, so that it may, and for both of these reasons, the fact that they knew English and they had the mules, the boys were offered jobs to aid the archaeologists working at Tikal. So this was just this amazing thing where these boys who were fantastic entrepreneurs who were like, we need to buy mules and we need to learn English because there's people coming in. Wrigley's an English company. We need to be able to climb the ranks. Because of those specific things, they were the ones that were chose to be the guides and to drive the archaeologists around when they got to Tikal to start to do the work. Jose Antonio became a driver, and he and his brother both worked many years with the Penn State University Archeology team, a university of which Don Julio spoke very highly. Through their efforts, they also helped secure Tikal as a national park, and Jose Francisco was eventually put in charge of major decisions regarding administration of the archaeological site. He was the original owner of the hotel, and we learned that we had in fact stayed the night in the original structure and even one of the rooms that were built for the archaeologists back in the 1950s. And at that point, we had not known that the room we were staying in was the quarters of the archaeologists back in the day, which was just so freaking cool. I was grateful to have received and preserved this story. Don Julio also told us various other facts, such as the influence of fruit companies, CIA agents posing as archaeologists in order to learn more about Fidel Castro's Guatemalan connections, and his own, Don Julio's own personal dislike for Vladimir Putin, whom he invited to come and meet a jaguar, but he figured the jaguar would probably throw up afterwards anyway because of the toxicity of that man. So I wanted to share that story, and I wanted to do Don Julio justice. We had just been able to hear this amazing, incredible story from this incredible man, and I wanted that story to be preserved. I wanted to write down, these are two men, his father and his uncle, who deserved to have their story told. And I think that it's wonderful. All storytelling is wonderful, but I've been specifically passionate over the years to tell the stories that have never been told before, to preserve the stories that might get lost in the cracks of history. So if you ever go to Tikal, if you stay at the hotel that Don Julio Ortiz owns, ask him sometime to tell you these stories. for as long as he's around, asked to go see these archaeologists' vehicles in the jungle. It was just a spectacularly rewarding experience that heightened our experience there at Tikal. And that is the kind of adventure I'm talking about. That's true treasure hunting. Finding a story like that was amazing. So thanks for listening. I'm Levi, and this is Outlandish.